What's up, guys? Sci-Fi Guy 2094 here. It is May the 4th, so I have to talk about Star Wars and how much I love it. Um, in my opinion, Star Wars is the greatest story ever told. If we're looking at episodes 1 through 6, um, it is, of course, it's basically pop culture. It established sci-fi as like a mainstream genre for film, and it's just like it's got a global influence for all types of different filmmakers who have written sci-fi scripts and made sci-fi films. It's iconic, it's influential. You have the most iconic villain in all of fiction, Darth Vader, who is actually a tragic hero. So there's a lot of elements from Greek literature that that George Lucas took, and tragic hero having tragic flaws being one of them. Obviously with Anakin Skywalker being the main character, he is the tragic hero. George Lucas has said it himself. Basically, episodes 1 all the way through 6 can be deemed as the tragedy of Anakin Skywalker. So, again, amazing franchise. George Lucas is, in my opinion, the greatest film writer of all time. Simply just because of Star Wars and the influence it's had on the world. Um, Growing up, I grew up with the prequel trilogy. The if anybody's older who's watching this, you guys are going to be the ones who grew up with like the OG Star Wars episode 4, 5, and 6. Um, the original Star Wars it was originally just titled Star Wars, and then later they called it A New Hope. But that was back in, 1977. And, the older generation grew up with that one, episode 4, 5, 6. Whereas, people more of my generation grew up with episodes 1, 2, and 3. But at least we can all agree that, even the prequels are much better than episodes 7, 8, and 9. So, and I don't have much of an issue with episodes 7, 8, and 9 if we're looking at it as like a standalone. Um, if it's like its own standalone thing and it wasn't really related to episodes 1 through 6, then I can be like, okay, yeah, this is an okay, decent story. In the broader context of the Star Wars universe, I wouldn't say it's as good. It's not a thorough story that actually expands upon the lore in the Star Wars universe. Episodes 7 through 9, there are elements of those films that I liked. Overall, I think they're decent films. I think they're okay films. I did enjoy them. I just want to point that out. Some people absolutely hate those. They despise those movies. And I want to say that they're okay films. I saw them in the theaters. They have an okay story. Great special effects. So I don't want to, obviously I don't want to spend the video trashing those films. I'm not going to be one of those Debbie Downers, those people that just like hate the trilogy that is episodes 7, 8, and 9. I think they're okay, but obviously they're just not better than, the original trilogy or the prequel trilogy. So, obviously as a kid, I was growing up, me and my brothers, we played with lightsabers, we fought each other. Of course, our friends were all into Star Wars. It was kind of like a boy thing. I mean, there were some girls that liked Star Wars, but, honestly, it was like mostly guys liked Star Wars. And, we would, have lightsabers and have the fights, and people would dress up as the Jedi on Halloween and things like that. So, huge influence on my childhood. We had the toys as well, like the action figures. So, just an awesome franchise. I absolutely love the prequel trilogy. Starting with the Phantom Menace, I gotta say is really awesome. And the most badass thing about that movie, of course, is Darth Maul. It's the villain is unmistakable. You know what I mean? He's so iconic. He has very few lines of dialogue, but he's been an iconic figure in the Star Wars universe. and that is, he's just like kind of the embodiment of rage. Darth Maul, he has the devilish appearance. Obviously you have the iconic fight scene with the music Duel of the Fates. I believe that's a John Williams composition, with Darth Maul versus Obi-Wan Kenobi and Qui-Gon Jinn. And to me, that is the most iconic part of that film. Obviously you have the pod racing scene, which is another amazing scene that I just really love. And of course the music is great throughout the original three films, episodes 1, 2, and 3. When I say original 3, right now I'm talking about the prequels. You just have so many great songs. And then, of course, Attack of the Clones, you have some great scenes with the Jedi on Geonosis fighting the droid army, Count Dooku versus Yoda, and of course, Anakin and Obi-Wan versus Dooku, which was just an amazing scene. Of course, the opening of episode 2 is pretty badass too, when this is bounty hunter and he's basically trying to assassinate a senator, which is Padme Amidala. So you have so many great moments in these first 3 films. Of course, Revenge of the Sith. I will go to my grave with the notion that Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith is the greatest film of all time. Even critics that hated the first 2 films, Episodes 1 and 2, even they kind of praised Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith. Of course, like I mentioned, it's got all the elements of like a Greek epic, with politics, betrayal, tragedy, there's great action. So it really is just like the greatest story ever told for episode 3. Obviously the whole theme of that film is the rise of Anakin Skywalker, or rather the rise of Darth Vader, and Anakin's fall to the dark side in an attempt to save the one person that he can't live without, and that is, of course, his wife Padme. And of course, we see how the story plays out, in episode 4, 5, and 6. His fall to the dark side, serving the Empire, committing evil deeds, and then eventually returning to the light. And Anakin Skywalker returns and vanquishes Darth Vader. So, again, amazing story, amazing franchise. I just can't say enough good things about Star Wars. It is, like I said, the greatest story ever told. So that's just my opinion on Star Wars, the franchise, how global it's become and influential and iconic. I absolutely love it. And kudos to the re-release, doing well in theaters after 20 years. They just released Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith in theaters for a 20-year anniversary. So yeah, that was back in 2005. I was in 5th grade, so I was about like 10 years old seeing Revenge of the Sith. So I absolutely love it still to this day. I still love the prequels. Sequels are not sequels, but the original trilogy. I didn't grow up with that one, but obviously I would see them on TV. We had the VHSs. The one I remember most is episode 4, A New Hope. I think I remember that episode the most. And then, of course, I got older and I rewatched them all. But as a kid, I remember episode 4 the most as being kind of the most iconic, in my opinion, just because I remember the most scenes from that one. But anyway, that is my little video today on Star Wars, how much I love it, how awesome it is. And, may the 4th be with you.